evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to a very special presentation on the homelessness crisis. We have a unique and wonderful panel today. Reverend Nayler, co-founder and director of Ryan's Hope, Keenan Aylwin, Harm Director Advocate, Angela Voss, founder of Jordan's Life, activist for the homeless, and Ash Pineau, street outreach volunteer, Ryan's Hope. Actually, this is a follow-up to our May 25th march, where we had people in Barrie, Hamilton, and London join forces together for a common cause. So we have, let me just go through briefly what our organization is. It's Voice of Men 360. And I am Dipchand Ramcharitar, the Outreach and Development Coordinator here at Voice of Men 360. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide services to help, support, and overcome men and boys' life challenges. We have a disclaimer that we'd like to have out here now. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith towards peaceful harmony. The views, opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not necessarily represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact your medical professional immediately. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. So on with the show, and we would like to start with Keenan because my understanding is that he has to leave first, so we want to accommodate him accordingly. We have a slew of questions that it seems unlikely we will not be able to get through today, given the time frame we're operating on. So we'll just go through a few of them as time permits. So first of all, this question is for all of you, but we will start with Keenan. Tell us briefly about your organization or what you support or represent.
Thanks for having me today. So I work at the Gilbert Center here in Barrie, Ontario, and we provide support to people experiencing homelessness, to people who use drugs, to the 2S LGBTQ community, and to people who are living with HIV and hepatitis C. And I work in our drop-in center as a harm reduction worker and as a linkage to care coordinator for people living with HIV and Hep C. And we are a space where everyone is welcome. We know that a lot of people experiencing homelessness and people who use drugs in our community don't feel welcome in what should be public spaces, like the library, like public squares. And we know that police and bylaw enforcement disproportionately target people experiencing homelessness and people who use drugs and stop them from just trying to exist and live in public spaces. So we welcome everyone to our space. We offer harm reduction support, some basic needs support, and referrals to other services. So I encourage people to support the Gilbert Center here in Barrie.
Thank you, Keenan. Christine, you want to go next?
Director of Ryan's Hope. Ryan's Hope is an organization that my husband and I founded in memory of our son Ryan. Ryan lived with mental illness and he self-medicated with street drugs because the pharmaceutical medications didn't work for him, and unfortunately we lost him to a toxic drug poisoning in 2020. And so our mission is to advocate and support people living with mental illness, substance use issues, and experiencing homelessness. So those issues are interconnected, and it's really hard to just like focus on one and not address where they intersect and how they connect with each other. So part of the work we do is advocacy and awareness, like participating in these type of discussions and speaking to politicians and advocating for change policy that harms people. And we also do direct support to people living in our community in survival mode and support them through encampment support and street outreach.
Well, first of all, sorry for that tragic loss, and obviously you're doing commendable work, just as Keenan is as well, and I'm sure the Ash and Angela also. So, Angela, can you go next and give us briefly what your group is about? I
Jordan's
think
life. We do a lot of different things in the community. I advocate a lot for prisoners. So I do a lot more of my work with prisoners that are newly being released. And I do a lot of outreach in the community when we can. And I try to engage different organizations and community members to be involved with that. And I am actually stationed in Hamilton, and I've just moved back to Tiny Township. So I'm kind of got a branch that runs from Tiny Township right through to Hamilton. So I'm working in Toronto, I'm working in Bradford. I have been to Newmarket to do some outreach for some people there that needed some positive inspirational speaking. And we did karaoke there. So it was quite fun to be a part of different neighborhoods and to stretch Jordan's name out and to allow people to know what's actually going on behind the scenes. And just being a community member that way. I don't really look at it like we're providing a service or anything. We're just pure support. We're just really trying to do what Jordan would have done and cared for the community and done as much as he could, right, to help his friends. So we just live on in his legacy at this point.
Yeah, again, all my condolences, and you're doing a wonderful job yourself. So kudos to you and the group there. And last but not least, Ash, can you give us some information on hand?
Hi everyone, I'm Ash. Thanks for having me here. And I work with Ryan Pope with my Aunt Christine. I got into this work because I believe wholeheartedly that in order for people to heal, they need to be met with love. They need to be met with love and support. I've also been personally touched by this crisis in a way that I couldn't even imagine had happened in my worst nightmare. Ryan and my cousin Tash, and that just really skyrocketed me to coming onto the front lines and doing what I can, and spreading love and fighting the stigma as much as possible.
Thank you, Ash. I apologize. We have a bit of an audio misconnection there, so just bear with us. So we have a slew of questions, and like I mentioned before, we don't have time to go through all of them. So let's dive right in. First of all, we're a men's organization, so we give priority to men, but we also assist others whoever we can, whenever we can. So first of all, men are roughly three times more likely to experience homelessness. Why do you think that is, and do you see any solutions that may apply uniquely to this situation? Anybody?
I think men are more stigmatized because of the intimidation factor. They are typically a bigger gender. I mean, in history, we've looked at men as very strong, construction, um, and domineering, right? So we've kind of learned that. And I think by channeling that back and recognizing that men are humans too, and that they are the same type of people that we are and have vulnerabilities, because we boosted these guys up to think that they can't show vulnerabilities. And like, I know even with my husband to ask for help when something's wrong, it takes him a little bit to do that because he has that strong hold on who he should be, um, in an ideology that really isn't what we are today in Canada and around the world. I mean, men should be equal in every respect when it comes down to the therapeutic rapport, recognizing that men do get abused as well as women, and stop channeling that, because the secrecy and the quietness of men not speaking out because of this stigma shames them when they do. And I think that more conversation needs to happen around men that are abused, neglected, and not treated right in society, and could have been given services and weren't. They were denied those services because of their persona, or what people thought, or thought of who they were because of what they looked like or what they represented, right? So we need to look at people as people instead of their outside exterior, and this um, stigma that we have that men should be more and stronger.
Yeah, very well put. The thing is, I think it's a combination of biology and social norms, and so we caught up in this situation now where, men innately don't have this drive in them to come forward. They feel embarrassed, ashamed. They feel they're not man enough, and things like that. So, um, they, society needs to change and embrace men as you mentioned, being vulnerable as anybody else. Anyone else has anything else to offer on this subject?
Just kind of building on what Angela said, that there is a lot more support for women and children because of different factors, and then also just the stigma. A lot of men don't feel like they can reach out and for help, and would rather just, tough it out on their own, keep to themselves. So they just have to do that. And yeah, it's the big actually comes back to stigma, and really tackle that stigma. I think we can really do a lot of good on this issue on so many factors.
Absolutely. So, anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. So first of all, I know in Simcoe County, the most recent survey of people experiencing homelessness, 53% identified as male, 44% identified as female. So yes, there is a discrepancy there, although it is fairly even. I think we have to look at the fact that we live in a patriarchal society where toxic masculinity runs rampant, and that harms both men and women. Like the other speakers have said, I think we have a societal norm that men don't speak up, don't speak about their mental health, don't speak about the issues that they're facing. I don't believe that that's an innate trait that men have. I believe that's a socialized trait and something that we can overcome. We can grow as human beings and lean on others for support, but our society has told us that that's not okay to do as men. And we need to fight back against that idea because it harms us. We know that there are higher suicide rates for men, and that economic hardship tends to hit men faster and harder. So we have a lot of work to do to break down the patriarchy and create a society where there is gender equality and gender equity.
Yeah, thank you, Keenan. Um, so, moving on, what are the major hurdles the homeless are likely to encounter when it comes to accessing housing and support services?
Follow up. How do you find somebody that's moving around the city all the time,
Yeah, good
right?
question.
How do we track people down in a way that we can find them to provide the services for mental health so that they can follow up with the services that they need? Because when you're out on the streets, I mean, 5 weeks I was on the streets in Hamilton with my vulnerable community. And that was one of the biggest thing is, what day is it? And where are we? What's going on? Because one day really leads into the next day, and it really becomes survival. So when you're thinking about your services that could make your life a little better, Well, I'm sorry, but breakfast in the bathroom and your whatever else is more important than those things. So I think that is a huge barrier too, because we lose time and space when we're sitting idle in these places, right? And we're feeling vulnerable. So that makes you feel even more depressed, which again puts barriers on you keeping track of your life and those schedules of where to meet people, how to meet them, where to find them, and how to follow up with them.
I
Yeah.
think
So,
Angela really raises an important point about the instability and the chaos of living on the streets and how hard it is to succeed when you're being traumatized day in and day out, surviving on the streets. I think the number one barrier to people getting support right now is just the lack of housing, period. We don't have affordable housing for people to go into. So even if they have a rent supplement in hand, a top up on their rent from the government, there's no units available. We don't have the housing. We don't have the social and supportive housing for people. So even if you're able to, make it to your housing support appointments, even if you're able to access emergency shelter and talk to a housing worker, the units just aren't there. So we are setting people up for failure. And I worry about the backlash that we're seeing from people against people experiencing homelessness in our community. I think we have a crisis of compassion. We need to recognize that people are homeless because of systemic failures, because of policy failures, and not because of personal failures. So we need to build that housing, get people off the streets, and that sets people up for success in the long run.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so I just wanted to follow up on what Keenan said. That's what we're seeing. It's the lack of housing. That's the biggest barrier. There are people that we know and we support in our community that have had money for first and last for the longest time. So even if they are able, that they have been one of the lucky ones that's able to get a rent supplement, and they've had family help them out to, save money for first and last. They can't find anything that's affordable, and when they do, they're competing with people that have jobs and good credit and that. So like the housing that is available, there's so many people competing for those units that are friends, that once you're into that cycle of being homeless, it's very, very hard to break out of. So we need, and this is a lack of, it's not moral failing, it's government failing. It's the government on all levels, just ignoring this crisis for, too many years, decades. And we need to start building social housing, supportive housing. And that's the only way we're going to come out of this.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well said.
wanted to add, sorry guys, just off of what Christine said and Keenan, about that there is a lack of compassion, especially here in Barrie. It's getting pretty nasty, and it's actually really concerning how bad it's gotten. Mainly because of the stigma pushing. There's been some very harmful stigma being pushed around here by, our mayor and our leaders around here that has created a terrible, absolutely disgusting ripple effect among our community. And the things that we see that people are saying, and people are genuinely convinced that people who are struggling are less than human, that they don't deserve help, that they don't deserve housing, that they woke up and they decided this. So why am I paying tax? Why am I doing this? Like, it's actually disgusting. So another big thing that is blocking people from getting the help that they need is this harmful stigma that people are pushing and going on and spreading. I'm all for having your opinions. We all need to have our opinions, different opinions. That's what makes the world go round. But when your opinion directly affects whether or not somebody gets the help that they deserve and they need, and is actually now causing the issue to be even worse, like, you need to really stop talking, take the time to do some actual education if you want to speak on the topic, or just don't speak at all. Because there's people that are going around pushing these stigmas and pushing these harmful things that, one, they don't even know fully what they're talking about, because they're pushing the same thing that they just hear from everyone else, are directly affecting this crisis, are directly affecting how people are getting the help that they need, and if they're getting it. And it's appalling, because at the end of the day, if we would all be working together and having a more of a compassionate, love and support approach to this, everyone's problems would be solved. We would all be happy, like everything would be solved. And yeah, So I think another big factor, just to recap, is that stigma.
Absolutely. Angela, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just honestly think that the targeting in the communities and stuff like that is a huge deal. I try not to say too much about the community members because I feel like they've been misled and they've been in this misconception that people make choices and that they're tomorrow they can make a choice and have a better life and it'll magically appear. Well, that doesn't actually happen. And even if they make good choices, there's going to be years and years that they're going to have to suffer before they ever get a home and be able to have that life. So I think reducing that stigma is really huge for all of us, that we can keep doing that and keep standing up for people. And I know with all of this big city mayor stuff and closing supervised consumption sites and putting people into these heart hubs that they're talking about, that I am like, my heart just breaks when I think about what they want to do to people. It would be great for seniors and stuff, but there's people that still need to live a life, right? So that stigma needs to be really targeted. And I think we need to challenge that and the fact that people are harming people. This is trauma. It's harsh. This is survival.
Yeah, that's a sad reality out there. But with people like yourselves and the valiant jobs you're doing and groups like ours, I think we can make at least a dent into the problem itself and work forward to see how best these things can be addressed. So, moving on, regarding the indigenous community, what challenges do you see they especially face when it comes to logistics, finances, and their mental capabilities or health?
Man, there's barriers. There's a lot of barriers. There is bylaws that push people into certain areas. There's other bylaws, and I'm in so many different communities, so it's really hard for me to speak on one community because I know in tiny township nobody's allowed to be seen. If they're seen at all, they're like, this is like a big deal. I've had to fight with Empower Simcoe and all these different places because they're like, well, they can't be seen in this town. Well, actually, yes, they can be. And that's actually safer for them to be seen. And if I'm supporting a vulnerable person, I'm going to make sure they're seen. I'm going to make sure that every single person that drives by them can see them because they're a vulnerable human, right? So we hide them. And then in places like Hamilton, we put them all in city parks. Well, everybody gets to use a city park, so now they've exacerbated the problem because everybody's in a city park where everybody wants to use the city park, but nobody can use it and feel safe about using the city park because of what's going on, because they feel uncomfortable. It's not that anything has necessarily happened outside of their perspective on lines about them stealing stuff and taking things. Look how disgusting they are. You know, those comments alone are the reason why people fear that. Those comments and those people and this fear mongering out there makes them fear them before they even know them. I mean, there's senior citizens out there that are wonderful, wonderful people, but people have never, ever gone near them because they're living in a tent and they are no longer human. That doesn't make sense to me. And it doesn't make sense to me that we have seniors there, but it's happened. And we have a lot of developmentally disabled, amputees, people in wheelchairs, exacerbated wounds. So they look at all this and they think, oh, these people are gross. Well, actually, no, they're actually neglected people. There's nothing wrong with them. It's the society that's keep pushing them away because of a stigma. And we need that stigma, honestly, is going to be the one to take down all of these bylaws and all of this stuff by putting people out there, making them visible. Say, we have to have a solution. Have to. We can't just push people into the back corners of life and leave them there because we've learned from corrections that there was no correcting at corrections. We've learned from HRC that when we put vulnerable people in one space with predators that will prey on them, that is exactly what's happened. And the trauma is exacerbated. Nothing was solved in that except for a bunch of people were hidden. and nobody talked about it. So we cannot do that with these heart hubs. We need them to be like right in the hub so that people in the community can continuously engage and be a part of that society, because that is how they're going to learn to do better for themselves, because we model better behavior. We pick people to model in our society that we like. We like them. We are inspired to feel hope and love from those people, right? So when we feel hope and love, we're inspired to do better for ourselves and for them, right?
Yeah.
So integrated society was the answer to closing HRC, closing mental health asylums, that we had to bring people into the face. Now we have Paralympics. We have things that have made the developmentally disabled visible. But now we're trying to make them invisible again by pushing them away. And I just honestly feel like we're taking a huge step back in society by segregating people more when we've continuously learned that segregation is not the answer.
Okay. Thank you, Angela.
Sorry, I get real passionate about that one.
I can hear it in your voice. We're unfortunately running out of time. I have one final question that I'm going to ask here. And basically, what role do mental health and addiction services play in addressing homelessness?
I just want to circle back real quickly, and then I'll go to this question. I think it's important that we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples on this land are disproportionately impacted by homelessness, by the toxic drug crisis. We know that in Simcoe County,
100%.
30% of the people experiencing homelessness were identified as Indigenous, and only 5% of the total population of Canada identify as Indigenous. So that is a gross overrepresentation in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness. The impacts of colonialism on this land, of violent colonialism on this land, has contributed to that problem. The trauma of colonialism has contributed to that problem. So we need to do a lot of work to address homelessness in Indigenous communities and support people and give real support to Indigenous nations and peoples throughout this land. On the questions of mental health and addiction, I think it's important that we recognize that people aren't going to be able to get mental health treatment or addictions treatment if they're worried about where they're going to sleep that night. We have to get housing to people first and foremost, because it sets people up to be able to get other supports for what they're facing in their life. We know that homelessness can exacerbate mental health issues. We know that some people use drugs just to get through the night, to stay awake so that their belongings don't get stolen overnight. So let's address homelessness. Let's give people housing, and then they'll be able to access those mental health and addictions support. That's called a housing first approach. The data is clear that that approach works. Let's do it.
Yeah, I agree. That to me makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, I agree with what Keenan's saying. Like healing starts with housing, right? And you can't really focus on any of the other issues that you're struggling with when you don't know where you're going to stay that night, when you don't know if you're going to have a meal, when you're fearful of losing, everything that you own. So really housing first, it's been proven to work, and that's what we need to do. We need to get people housed so that we can support them with whatever other issues that they're struggling with. And again, it speaks to the stigma that like we're blaming like the fact that government failures, that we don't have a housing. It's because it's an individual's person's fault because of their mental health or their addiction, where no, it's actually system failure, government failures to provide like affordable housing, accessible housing for people. And so that's where we need to be advocating at that level and saying you need to start living up to your responsibility as our elected leaders.
okay, thank you, Christine. Well, I did say that would be the last question, but I'm going to squeeze one more in. And if you can briefly just say what's going on in your own cities, what are you trying to do to, advocate on behalf of the homeless? Just briefly, because we've run out of time.
So I know in Barrie, we are seeing sort of an unprecedented attack on people experiencing homelessness. And like I said earlier, a crisis of compassion. Our political leaders are using people experiencing homelessness and people who use drugs as scapegoats, blaming them for the systemic issues that they've created through their policy failures. They're trying to implement bylaws that punish people for living in poverty, punish people for being homeless, instead of reaching out a hand of support and giving people services that they so desperately need. They're dividing us to deflect blame from themselves as policymakers to the people who are powerless in this situation and who have been harmed by their policy failures. So we need to stand together and say, these are our neighbors, our friends, our family, and everyone is deserving of support. And we need our political leaders, the people in positions of power, to step up to the plate and implement radical policies that will address the root causes of these issues. It's been going on too long. Too many people have died. Too many people have suffered. We need supports now.
Thank you, Keenan. Christine?
Yeah, I agree with Keenan. Like it's very, very scary times that we're living in Barrie. You could just feel the divide between people in our community, and our unhoused people are just the direct, like the hate that is have been directed on them is unjust, and it's scary, and a lot of it is coming from our political leaders who it's actually their duty to bring community together and to dispel fear and stigma, but like Keenan said, they're using our friends as scapegoats to deflect from their own policy failures, and their answer to everything is more police, more criminalization. And it's like, we cannot get ourselves out of this crisis by doing the same thing, right? Like we need to go upstream and look at the root cause of the issues, which starts with supporting people, starts with treating people as human beings and meeting them where they're at. And that's what we need to keep advocating for.
Thank you, Christine. Ash?
Yeah, just to add, so some of the stuff that we are doing to try and help combat this stigma and bring some compassion and love to Barrie is me, Christine, and Angela are actually coming live from our camp out that we did last night in solidarity with our friends to kind of show Barrie that, there is a community here. There is love. There is, healing can happen here if we come together and just kind of really combat that stigma and what our mayor is trying to do by, Keenan said, using our most vulnerable as scapegoats. So yeah, something we've done recently, currently right now, is finishing up our solidarity camp.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Angela?
Hey there. There's lots of different things that are kind of going on in my community up north. Like I said, they redirect services and stuff like that. But I just keep trying to advocate for people and trying to work with the services and trying to spread awareness, because I think honestly, a lot of the barriers in the northern community is a miscommunication of who is politically responsible. And when I talk to people about, they say, Trudeau is responsible, and I'm like, oh, let's dial this back a little bit, okay? Because federally, housing wasn't under that district for a very, very long time. And under each municipality had their own responsibilities and under a provincial umbrella. So when I talk to people, I think that there's a real big miscommunication with those kinds of things. So I think spreading that word of where these tiers of parliament and how our system works in Ontario is actually going to be beneficial to people, because I think we keep voting for the same thing in the northern areas because we think that it's okay. We think that marginalizing people and pushing people away is actually not happening under this government, but it is actually happening. And they're making it seem like they're doing the right thing, but we keep segregating people again, like I said. So we need to keep challenging those conversations to make people aware of the civics and where those policies lay, and have them address their mayors effectively. Because when they're writing letters to your MPs and stuff like that, I found a lot of those letters that I filtered through were really directing at Justin Trudeau.
Right.
And yes, there is a lot of services that are under his umbrella, but these social services and all these different things that we need, because it's not just about housing first, it's about finding the need of what their housing needs are going to be.
Okay.
Because let's face it, 95% of the people that I've spent the time with on the streets, because they're so vulnerable, that's why I stayed there for so long, right? They
Okay.
can't just be thrown in an apartment. That doesn't work for those people. They need an assistive living circumstance. Some people will need an independent living circumstances. So it's not just necessarily about housing first. It's about finding the needs of the people and supporting them where they're at.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Angela. We've pretty much come to the end of the show, but there is one important thing that we must touch on, and I would ask one of you to talk a bit more about it. It's the upcoming march on October 10th. We're looking to see how many people we can get to contribute in whatever way they can. So if one of you can briefly give us some more information about that upcoming march in October, please.
Yeah, I'd love to speak on it. So we had our first march in May, our March to End Homelessness. And on October 10th, which is World Homeless Day, we are planning to march again. And we're hoping to have more communities, not just across the province, but across the country, join us on that march and be marching, because this is not an issue that's just affecting Barrie or Hamilton or London. Communities across our entire country are being affected by lack of housing and lack of supports for people. And so this is our way to come together and just to make our voices louder and to show up and amplify and support each other. And so we're really encouraging people in Barrie to come and join us. We're going to be meeting at the Spirit Catcher at 5:30 on October 10th, and we're going to be marching through downtown, and then we're going to end with a community meal and some speakers, and everyone's welcome to join us.
Thank you so much, Christine. Just a couple of tidbits about how you can contact us here. We are at info@voiceofmen360.org, and our phone number is 226-289-8784. So we've come to the end of the program. We would like to thank each and every one of you, Christine, Keenan, Angela, and Ash, for your invaluable contribution. First of all, to the work you're doing out there individually and collectively, and for being a part of this special broadcast. Thank you so much. And to everyone who's tuned in, thank you for your time and your participation as well. So on behalf of Voice of Men 360, this is me, Dipchand Ramcharitar, signing off. Have a good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you may be. Thank you.
Thanks.